Good Omens, written by Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett, as a show, is currently getting a third season, so it feels appropriate to run down the events of the book. And because it's an English project, and because it's fun. Go on, sue me. And yes, Good Omens was originally a book, spanning 400 pages of sweet, sweet, dry British humor. For those who've seen the series, I am obligated to report that there are no on-screen homosexual activities in the book. I am deeply sorry. Oh, and spoilers for the book and season one of the show, clearly. To get us started, let's go over some of the characters. First on the character list, we meet Aziraphale, the Angel of the Eastern Gate and one of our main protagonists. He's over 6,000 years old, currently runs a bookshop in Soho, London called AZ Fell & Co. He does not sell books. Do not try to buy his books. The Co in AZ Fell & Co. probably belongs to Anthony J. Crowley, aka Crowley. Crowley is a demon and served as the serpent in Eden. Also being well over 6,000, he has a small, unlived-in apartment where he yells at his plants and sulks when warranted. If you cannot tell, Aziraphale and Crowley are probably my two personal favorites. They're insanely entertaining as a pair. Most of the characters are classified as static, but that doesn't mean that they're boring. They work for heaven and hell respectively, though you could argue Crowley is more of a free agent, also meaning he's rebellious, also meaning he would probably listen to MCR. And their bosses are the Metatron, voice of God, hated by most fans of the show, and Beelzebub, Duke of Hell, liked by most fans of the show. Alongside Beelzebub are Hastur and Liger, the perfect goons to accompany the forces of hell. We're ready for the plot. No, we aren't. The book begins with the beginning of all things, as Aziraphale sits at the Eastern Gate, as the guardian of said gate might do, and vibrates with anxiety. Crowley, at this point called Crawley because he's a snake, roll with it, rolls his eyes aggressively and has a conversation with Aziraphale, questioning the intentions of heaven and hell. Aziraphale shakes with fear more at the mere idea of questioning anything ever. Time skip to 11 years from now, where the book takes place. Roll with it. And Crowley is casually speeding down a road, endangering the lives of any pedestrians within a 30-mile radius. He screeches to a halt and chats to Liger and Hastur, who blab on about how evil they are, and then informs Crowley he's supposed to be part of a big job, bringing the Antichrist to Earth. You see, both heaven and hell have had enough of Earth dawdling around and have decided to enact the apocalypse and start a big old funnel war between the forces. Crowley is extremely disgruntled with this, but has no choice to accept it. The two goons hand Crowley a basket containing a small baby. The Antichrist, destroyer of worlds, son of Satan, is probably peeing himself right now. Crowley gets hit with a fraction of the emotions of a single mother and hops back into his car with the child. He's meant to deliver it to a group of satanic nuns so they can do some big secret baby swap with a family and unleash the Antichrist into the world. Here we are introduced to the real meat of the story. Buckle up. Mr. and Mrs. Young are having a baby at a hospital run by satanic nuns. Mr. and Mrs. Dowling, the soon-to-be parents of the Antichrist, are also having a baby in the same satanic-run hospital. 3 babies are in this mix. Mr. and Mrs. Young's blonde-haired baby boy, Mr. and Mrs. Dowling's blonde-haired baby boy, and Mr. Satan's blonde-haired baby boy. The nuns need to swap the Dowling baby with the Satan baby. The young baby wasn't actually supposed to be there. But it's fine, right? No, it isn't. Crowley drops off Satan baby, and one of the nuns accidentally swaps the Satan baby with the Young's baby. So now the literal Antichrist has been misplaced. But who cares about the misplacement of the Antichrist and the world being at stake? We need to introduce Anathema Device, the great, however many greats are needed, granddaughter of Agnes Nutter, a witch. Agnes Nutter could see into the future, and so she wrote down a big old book of them called The Nice and Accurate Prophecies of Agnes Nutter, Witch. And it's Anathema's job to help figure out these prophecies, because that's what her family's been doing for years. Also new character, we meet Newton Pulsifer, the great, however many greats are needed, grandson of Witchfinder Thou Shalt Not Commit Adultery, Pulsifer. The guy who, funnily enough, killed Agnes Nutter while simultaneously killing himself due to the pounds of gunpowder Agnes concealed before she was burnt at the stake. Newton sucks at computers. He wants to be good at them, but he sucks. Meanwhile, Aziraphale and Crowley get absolutely hammered and rant about all sorts of nonsense. They bicker about eternity and act like complete ding-dongs until they choose to be undrunk. With that, they decide to find the Antichrist, who definitely belongs to the Dowlings, right? No. And influence the child with both demonic and angelic guides. New characters. Get used to this. The 4 horse people of the apocalypse. Scarlet, aka Red, more famously known as War. She casually pops down to start some fighting and awaits her call. Sable, aka Black, more famously known as Famine. He runs a really awful food chain and tricks people into eating food with zero substance to keep them hungry. He's casually eating food with his accountant and grins while watching her silently go hungry and awaits his call. Albus, aka White, aka Chalky, aka Wes, aka more famously known as Pollution. Pestilence retired a while back, so Pollution took his place. He's casually dumping pollutants into the ocean and awaits his call. The final horse person. He's casually everywhere, unescapable, a known presence to all beings. Death awaits his call. At another time, Crowley knocks on the door of the Dowling family, but he's not Crowley, but he is. Nanny Asterith, ready to be hired to influence the Dowling's child, named Warlock, to the satanic side. Aziraphale also knocks at the Dowling family's door, but he's not Aziraphale, but he is. Brother Francis the Gardener, ready to be hired and to influence Warlock into the angelic side. Nanny Asterith teaches young Warlock to think that murder is okay, and all things are dirt to be crushed under his feet. Brother Francis tells Warlock, no, that's not right, and explains the complete opposite. All creatures need to be cared for and loved. Nanny Asterith hisses at Francis like a feral cat. Let's get to 11 years later. Warlock is having his 11th birthday party, but whoa, they need entertainment. Luckily, unluckily, Aziraphale knows a bit of stage magic, so he gets up there and gives it his all, and one of the children promptly calls him a slur. So, the Hellhound never shows up, and Aziraphale gets pied in the face. Aziraphale and Cringely start freaking out. Then Satan pops in on Crowley's radio. Hey, how's the dog? It is there, yeah. Oh, wow, totally, look at it go.
So no head?
Meanwhile, the real Antichrist is hanging out with his buddies in a small town called Tadfield. His name is Adam, and his pals, Wensleydale, Brian, and Pepper, are talking about Adam's birthday. Adam mentions he wants a dog. Ha ha ha. In order for the Hellhound to become truly powerful, Adam needs to give it a name, like Killer, or Bone Ripper, or like Lawyer, something truly evil that can give it meaning. So, naturally, he names it Dog. The Hellhound arrives to Adam as a crummy little crusty dog. Crowley once again puts all pedestrians in danger while driving, and Aziraphale is regulated to Passenger Survivor. They bicker about their situation and decide to go back to the satanic nun hospital to find the real Antichrist. They hit a lady. Oh look, it's Anathema! She's in her 20s now and has moved to a small cottage in Tadfield to do some more research and looking into Agnes Nutter. But not now, because she's been hit by a Bentley. Aziraphale loses his marbles, and Crowley just stands there, not really wanting to help. Aziraphale insists they let her hitch a ride back to her house. Anathema thinks about how she got hit by a gay couple while they speed off again. One thing, however, Anathema forgot her book in the back of the car. Yay! Anathema realizes she just lost her 100-year-old highly treasured book and starts hyperventilating. Aziraphale and Crowley pull up to the hospital and promptly get shot on sight. Turns out the hospital was mostly eradicated, and in its place, one of the nuns, Sister Mary Loquacious, one of the nuns who swapped the babies, now known as Mary Hodges, has been using it as a manor to host corporate meetings and team-building events. This one happened to involve paint guns, and Crowley and Aziraphale were caught in the crossfire. They enter the manor without being shot again, And meet Mary Hodges. Crowley turns the paint guns outside into real guns, just for fun. They try getting information from her about the location of the Antichrist, but all Mary remembers is the hospital being burned down after the 3 babies arrived. Thanks, Hester. And that the Antichrist had, quote, cute little toesy woesies. They hop back into the Bentley and bicker some more. You notice a pattern. Aziraphale mentions he has some guys to help out in finding the Antichrist, and Crowley says the same. Adam sees Anathema crying over her lost book and tries consoling her, poorly. And she starts teaching this child about nuclear power plants and whale poaching and such. Adam wants to change the world. Anathema gives him magazines. Adam reads them and falls asleep, while worldwide nuclear reactors shut down. Now we get introduced to a new character, Sergeant Shadwell, the only actual member of any sort of modern witch-finding group. And Newton, now also in his 20s, found an ad in the paper to join the Witchfinder Army. When he gets to the address, he meets Shadwell's neighbor, Madame Tracy, who dabbles in spiritual contact. Newton becomes a Witchfinder private, after heavy questioning, of course. How many nipples you got, lad? Want to make sure you aren't a demon. What? Mr. Shadwell's very not weird questioning is interrupted by a call from Aziraphale, asking Shadwell to help with a very particular person. Moments later, Crowley calls Shadwell and asks the same thing of him. So now Shadwell doubly needs to find the Antichrist. He eventually finds out the kid lives in Tadfield and lets both entities know. A mailman, who struggles to be important after this, delivers a package to War, a big old sword. This was her call. Then he finds Famine and gives him a pair of brass scales. This was his call. Next, he hands Pollution a package containing a crown. This was his call. Finally, he looks around to find the person who's meant to claim the last item, and gets hit by a car. There he encounters Death and delivers the message, "Come and see." That was its call. Newton is sent off to Tadfield to go hunt some witches and the Antichrist by Shadwell and takes his leave. But before he reaches Tadfield, he has a very nice and very normal chat with literal aliens who drop down from a UFO. Adam and the gang are goofing off when they hear a massive crash and find Newton Pulsiver's car upside down. He'd been thrown off the road by people appearing in tunnels in the street, so they take him to Anathema. Newton wakes up at Anathema's house. She knows he's a witchfinder from opening up his wallet and finding a bunch of random junk Shadwell has given him to quote-unquote protect him. Anathema gives him a rundown of how she knew he'd show up. Newton's head hurts. Adam zones out aggressively while his friends talk. Voices are starting to speak to him in his head, telling him he's got power and he needs to make things happen. Very normal childhood activities. He starts going on to his friends about how the world sucks and how they need to fix it, and how it'd be super fun if he made the world perfect. The things Adam has been thinking about have started to take effect into the world. Whaling ships are going down, UFOs have appeared, tunneling networks, and Atlantis showed up. The Kraken is real. Again, time is running out, and the apocalypse has started. A storm is absolutely slam-dunking Tadfield now, as Adam's powers are getting stronger. Newton and Anathema are mildly losing their minds as a hurricane is raging by Anathema's cottage. Agnes predicted this, but that won't stop Newton from rambling on about what he's never done. They conclude 3 things. 1. Newton has never done anything ever. 2. The world is probably ending soon. 3. What other way to pass the time than to do the horizontal monster mash? Shadwell, in the middle of the storm, decides to go find Newton. He marches over to Aziraphale's bookshop to get some cash to go to Tadfield. Aziraphale paces around his bookshop and draws a circle on the ground, puts candles, and summons the Metatron. He explains to the Metatron that he's found the Antichrist, and now the war between heaven and hell doesn't need to happen. The Metatron exhales in a monotone fashion and insists the war will happen anyways. Aziraphale then calls Crowley and tries to explain what's happening. Shadwell overhears all this and breaks into the bookshop, backing Aziraphale into the circle, where he discorporates. Shadwell now believes he has demon-killing powers. As Shadwell flees, a candle tips over and sets the bookshop ablaze. In the demon sphere, the Antichrist was supposed to be brought to a field with his hellhound to spark the apocalypse. But when Warlock showed up, very un-Antichrist-like, hell grit its teeth in a cartoony manner. Crowley is at his apartment, casually yelling at his plants when he gets a call. A voice threatens him and says he'll be collected and dealt with for messing up the mission. And he starts to hear the sounds of demons walking up to the stairwell to get to him. Crowley pulls out a flask, slowly pours water into a bucket, and places it above his door. He grabs a water mister he used for plants and sits in wait. Hastur and Liger barge in, and the water covers Liger. The demon screams in pain as he is melted away and murdered. The bucket above the door contained holy water Aziraphale had given Crowley in the 60s as part of a deal. Hastur flies into a rage and Crowley holds up the mister. But Hastur realizes that the mister is full of normal, plain, unholy water due to a small droplet landing on Crowley's hand. Hastur is frankly insulted by Crowley's trick and advances further. Crowley picks up the phone and vanishes into the phone line. Hastur follows but gets trapped in an answering machine. Crowley, escaping the answering machine, gets in his car and wheels up to the bookshop and goes full-on feral, seeing it ablaze. The four horse people have gotten in contact with each other and are starting to ride. The apocalypse is now in full swing, and Crowley is speeding once again towards the closest exit to Tadfield. He's briefly inconvenienced by the fact that the M25 highway is cut off by a gigantic ring of fire. Madame Tracy is hosting a spiritual contact session with a few people, and instead of coming into contact with the actually intended dead person, Aziraphale appears and co-inhabits the body of Madame Tracy. Shadwell accuses Madame Tracy of being part demon. Aziraphale tells Shadwell he needs to kill the Antichrist to stop the end of the world / the war between heaven and hell. A perfectly normal task to drop on an old man. They hop on Madame Tracy's scooter and head off to Tadfield. In other vehicle-related events, Crowley drives through a wall of fire like the very sane, very average guy he is. Adam tells his friends he's got new buddies coming, and that his new world will be super fun. None of his friends like this idea. Adam doesn't like that his friends don't like this idea. Newton and Anathema stopped visiting Funky Town and have now started to look at any possible notes Agnes could have left behind about how to start the apocalypse. They decide to head down to the Tadfield Air Base in hopes of finding anything useful. Adam argues a bit with his friends before calming down and telling them to get their bikes, saying they need to go talk with some people. Aziraphale decides that the scooter is going too slow and decides to speed things up by making it fly. Madame Tracy is on board. Shadwell is not. Nobody listens to Shadwell. Newton and Anathema head over to the airbase, and so do Adam and the gang, and so do the four horse people. Crowley, Aziraphale, Shadwell, and Tracy are also, funnily enough, going to the airbase. Adam and the gang fight off the four horse people using the power of nuh-uh, and Beelzebub and the Metatron show up. Aziraphale and Crowley convince the two that war should be further talked over and planned a little better, and they reluctantly agree and vanish. A day later, all is back to as it was before. The bookshop, unburnt. The Bentley, unburnt. Me, still burnt. Aziraphale and Crowley sit back. Shadwell and Madame Tracy settle down. Newton and Anathema do whatever they do. And Adam sits in a garden. It's all as it should be. Good Omens is a lot. The tone is humorous, yet it's got a bit of a darker hint to it. The general feel of the book itself is static, but it hardly gets boring. It's not comedic per se, but it isn't fully dark and dramatic. The tense moments are tense, the funny moments are funny, and I really enjoyed it. I haven't outwardly laughed at a book in quite a while. It would entirely depend on who I was speaking to if I were to recommend it to them or not. Good Omens isn't for everyone, but if biblical references and dry humor are your thing, I'd say you might like checking it out. And, because it's an English project, I gotta end with a quote. Many people meeting Aziraphale for the first time formed 3 impressions: that he was English, that he was intelligent, and that he was gayer than a tree full of monkeys on nitrous oxide. All but a taste of the impeccable, ineffable, hilarious writing in this book. A good night! Woo!